Yo, so I just finished a Rogue Only to Eternity challenge for the Season 5.5 patch, and I just wanted to make a guide that essentially captured everything that I had learned about the character over the past 2 months in terms of being a very advanced guide. This guide is going to cover not the basics, but more so everything about the nuances, anything you need to know to be really a specialist at this character. If you really want to just know something about how she operates, or just the stuff that I don't think people really thought about when they first saw her. So, without further ado, I will be going into ability breakdowns, her bad matchups, her good matchups, in terms of what my playstyle looks like, all of that. So, any information you'll need about the character in terms of a general sense, all the way down to the nitty gritty tech that I use, it will be right here. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the rest of the guide. First things first, I think we're going to start off with Rogue's Block because it's the simplest ability. Her block is your main source of damage mitigation. It is pretty much, minus like some small shield stuff, the only damage mitigation she really has in her kit. And so you really want to have to well time it in order to make sure that you're getting the most use out of it. What I mean by that is that as long as you are facing your target, even if you are not taking direct damage in front of you, you will get the damage mitigation. So for stuff like Emma's Crystal, when it pops, you can actually hold block on the time that it pops and it will reduce the damage for you. And that works for basically every cooldown in the game. As long as you are facing the target of what you were trying to damage mitigate, you will always get the damage mitigation for it. Otherwise, the only real time you're going to be holding block is to reduce the damage you're absorbing to build ult charge for your supports. And the only other thing I want to really note about the block is the green bar. The green bar is not really something that you need to pay too much attention to. Is more of an opportunistic thing that you need to pay attention to, meaning that if the bar fills up while you are blocking something coincidentally and you have enough bar to make it like 50% full, because that'll be like 70 to 100 damage, you can then use that to go for a pick or go for a high burst damage to get more ult charge. But otherwise, don't really focus on it too much because it is not really a core part of the gameplay loop. The next thing I want to talk about is Rogue's Bash, because in my opinion, I think this is the strongest and most important cooldown in her kit. As you can see in the clips above, the biggest tip I want to give about Bash is that it is omnidirectional, meaning that it goes anywhere your camera goes. You do not have to go in a straight line. That is the biggest mistake I see a lot of rogues use, is that I see them always go straight when it is one of probably the most key dynamic abilities you have in terms of mobility, where you can cut corners, you can chase kills around corners with it. It'll also help you survive because you can now like change your direction to go into cover. But other than that, it is used in quite literally everything. I basically use Bash off cooldown, and I decide how I want to use Bash in the exact moment I'm using it. So the best way to describe this is every time I see my Bash off cooldown, I'm using it. Whether the key ones are, if I'm already doing something else and I see it off cooldown, I will use it to combo with something else, and those combos will all be on my TikTok. I'm not going to put them in this guide. If I'm just walking to engage, I will always use my shift to engage and connect with an enemy first before using a major cooldown. It's just really the best way, other than just straight left clicking, if you want to save your cooldown cycle, to do anything in the game, and I highly recommend using it as much as possible. Next, we're going to talk about Rogue's Shift, which is the pull circle, which is probably your best way to initiate any large team fight. If you are not trying to isolate targets and charge in with your Bash, your Shift is easily the next button that you should probably be using, and it's for two reasons. The first reason is that is your best way to build ult charge, because it hits the largest group of enemies consistently and does a pretty decent amount of damage while doing so. And secondly, it is the best way for you to displace and initiate, because it has the most room for error when trying to escape. I'm saying that meaning that there are two reasons why I use it as an initiation tool, other than just straight damage and being able to hit a lot of enemies. One, it has the highest room for error, because when you press shift twice really fast, or before the dash is done, if you are like spamming the button, you can actually cut the dash short. And it is also the dash that, out of every dash in her kit, that collides with the most things. In terms of people, in terms of environment, it really gets cut short a lot really easily, so you never want to rely on it, as well as since you're dashing out with it, you're not getting the most value out of the pull anyway, so it's pretty much useless as an escape unless you really, really have to. The two situations I like to use it the most is probably when pulling tanks back. If you are really stuck in a front to back scenario, You use it a lot to pull tanks away from your team, so they either have to turn and look at you, which means they're getting shot in the back, or it takes them a little bit more time to get to wherever they want to go, which could be enough to change their plan entirely, depending on how much distance you are from the enemy team in general. And the second area I like to use this move a lot is to group supports. So if you shift onto supports, like you find a flank angle to take before a fight starts, and shift onto supports, they either are forced to heal each other or heal the enemy team while also forcing cooldowns that they necessarily didn't want to use to keep themselves alive. So the two things that happen are when you're engaging in these fights, they either die to you because their team is, if you do it at the right time, their team will be in trouble and pretty crit. So you are more likely to get a pick on one of them, or they end up patty caking themselves and the enemy team has no heals for a solid 3 or 4 seconds, which is also plenty of time for, especially in this game with how high the TTK is, with no healing, your team to get a pick and you have an advantage in the fight anyway while still living. The other thing I see people not doing, especially with the shift, when you're already in a position where you need to either stay alive or where you want to be and brawl a lot better, is shifting straight up. If you use the dash straight up and then activate the shift while you're in the air, when you land, the shift will actually activate and still hit everybody that in the position that you're in. It's a really good way to actually mitigate damage for yourself as well, because unless you are 1 HP, the enemy is not going to track you all the way up there unless they really need to. And even if they do, there's no guarantee that they're going to hit their shot while flicking their camera straight into the air. So it allows you to mitigate a lot more damage as well as still be in the same place and displace everybody you want to. Instead of just double shifting twice in the middle of the fight, because it'll make you take a lot more damage overall. Next, we're going to talk about Rogue's Kick, which is the uppercut kick that goes into the ranged attacks, and there are a few main reasons why this kick is not your engagement tool and more of your mid-fight tool. One is that it is your most awkward form of movement that you can manipulate in the middle of a fight, so it makes you super hard to hit. Secondly, it gives you shields whenever you connect the ranged auto attacks. So you want to engage with your shift and then use your E while in the middle of the fight to maintain your health bar and allow your supports to build ult charge off of you while you're still able to stay in the fight, because the shields will serve as kind of a pillow and a window for your supports to heal you while you're inside. And 3, it is your main combo tool. Any combo you see with Rogue is always going to use her E, which means that you want to put yourself in a position to maybe get a kill, but you need your E up in order to secure those kills. So you always want to use it second or as a fight devolves, so that you know whether you need to use it to survive or whether you need to use it to make a play to get those picks. Okay, next we're going to talk about Steal, which is the F ability, and I'm going to say this very clearly from the start. With the exception of 2 abilities, the actual abilities you steal do not matter that much. You can go into practice range, and I highly recommend at least knowing what they do, because they will help you make plays later on, but in terms of learning the character from the start, or trying to learn the character at an in-depth level, I think the other 2 categories in terms of stat sticking and ult canceling are far more important. Let's go over which 2 abilities I think are the best to take first, and then I will go over stat sticking, because everybody knows what ult canceling is, because it's just a CC ability. You can use it to dash into everybody and stop their ults from happening. So the 2 abilities I would permanently steal if they are in your game are Emma and Groot. Emma is the best steal in the game, because giving a character like Rogue, a high mobility execution dive character, the ability to be CC immune and have damage reduction is the most broken thing I've ever seen in my life. Whenever I get an Emma in my game, I immediately steal Emma off cooldown, pop Diamond Form, and live in their backline to make infinite space. The other reason you make infinite space with this steal is because the damage reduction from your block and the damage reduction from Diamond Form stack. So if you are blocking high burst damage at the right time for the entire 8 seconds that you are in Diamond Form, you are basically at 80% damage reduction, meaning that the team cannot ignore you, because in that form you can kill whoever you want as well. The second Steel in Groot is the only other important one because as a dive character, being able to off cooldown brawl and play front to back with a Groot wall is actually surprisingly really good for tempo. Because what happens as the order of operations when a fight breaks down, you steal the Groot wall, you place the Groot takes 80% of his HP because your entire team is looking at the Groot. He has to back up, and while he is backing up and taking resources from the enemy team, that is your opportunity to full dive on the enemy backline and make sure you cause as much chaos while that Groot is getting healed up, because Groot takes a long time to heal because of that HP. And that is why that matchup is probably the best. If that didn't exist at this, I think it would honestly be much worse, but um, it's super cool that there's a tank that plays like it's a dive tank that can play into anti tanks because you can steal the ability that makes them anti tank tools. And that is why I think those matchups are actually probably some of the strongest ones you can have. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the most important part of Steel, which is stat sticking. What stat sticking does for Rogue essentially means that you are overstatting your character by using Steel, where you get the healing over time from stealing from supports, you get the damage buff from healing from DPS, and you get the HP buff from stealing from tanks. And I'm going to go over what your game plan is every time you get a steal, because each of those steals functions your character differently in terms of what you want to be doing while you have it. So for tank, because that is the one you're going to be having the most, since tanks are either going to be in your face all the time or contesting your angle all the time, it basically, you are using it to front to back and brawl to build ult charge yourself as fast as possible, as well as build your support's ult charge, because the higher your health pool is, the more healing they have to do. It's what helps you build support ults as fast as possible. Second is the support steal. Support steal, if you are ever in a position to steal from a support, it means that you are on an angle where you should be able to stay on those supports. And why is that? Why surviving on the supports is so important is because of what I was saying about the shift earlier. This goes deeper into that game plan, where with the healing over time, you were able to basically live for a very long time in the enemy backline and make them heal each other to the point where either everybody on their team has to turn to peel you because they are not getting healed, or the fight is crashing and burning for them so fast that because the enemy supports are healing each other, the rest of their team is falling over and you win that fight anyway. And then third is the DPS steal. The DPS steal is what makes you an individual playmaker and allows you to have the damage to actually make plays and get picks yourself. So if you ever are in a convenient spot to get a DPS steal, then that is when you start using combos. That is when you are cooldown dumping on the enemy team, because you are very likely with that 20% damage buff to get a pick on the enemy, either DPS or support, or you are melting the enemy tanks on your own. So it's really, really, really nice for individual plays. Finally, we're going to talk about Rogue's ultimate. I'm not going to talk about the team up. If you want to learn about the team up or how I use it, specifically the one with Gambit, you can come over to my stream and ask me about it, but this guide is going to be of all the base abilities and longevity, because team ups are changing constantly, so I don't want to cover it. But the ult has one of three jobs. You can do three different things with this ult. You can use it to stall, whether it be to be in an overtime situation or you need to stall point while your team does anything else. You can use it to drain ults if you are ult tracking properly and you need to stop a support ult or a combo from happening. You can use it for that. Or it is a kill ult, which I don't think a lot of people understand about the character, is that this ult can be used as a solo ult to kill squishies, because there is a key part of the attributes of this character when it comes to stat sticking, that the ult stat stick, because the ult drain gives you all of the stat passives, and the passive that you steal from somebody both stack. So what you want to do if you are trying to kill with this ult is you want to find a DPS, you want to steal the DPS, and then you want to ult on top of the DPS, so that the 20% from the DPS passive from your normal steal and the 20% from the ult also stack. So you will be at a 40% damage buff in the middle of the enemy squishies, which means you can hit them with literally every cooldown you want. You don't even have to know a combo. You can just run at them with shift and an E and just spam your buttons, and you will guaranteed get a pick out of it if you can set up that scenario. So that is the biggest three things. Obviously, her ult is pretty straightforward in terms of what it does, so I don't think I need to go too in depth on anything else. But that is the one thing I don't see a lot of people do that it really needs to be done if you really want to start carrying your games, especially if you play this character solo queue. Okay, if you made it this far, I appreciate you for watching this guide. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I wanted to put in here, and I hope that these advanced tips at least help a lot of you really flesh out some of the things this character wants to do, because I know she's pretty complicated, but she is so fun once you get a hang of it. I've pretty much only been playing her at least 80% of my gameplay, so if you ever want to see me or ask any questions that I didn't answer, you can come by my stream. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your night.